passiontimes.hk。
Hello， 翻到嚟大埔嘅部分啦。好啦，以下嘅時間將會由英語廣播。Okay, I'm so sorry that I didn't do an English channel last week because I wasn't varnishing my instrument. No, actually I was varnishing my instrument, but I had a bit of an accident with the varnish and so on and so forth, so I had to, well, it was quite messy, so I didn't record any of that. So right now, I already have, I think 3 layers of varnish on this. So from what I showed you before, it was really light. Well, it was tanned, but it didn't have any color. So the last video I did, it was the clear coat. So after the clear coat, started putting on the varnish. And I think I also showed you how I scraped it last time. So I scraped it again. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you should be able to see it. Like, so there are these lines. That's from the scraper. So between every layer of varnish, I scrape off any solid bits. Like, it could have been pigment powder that's not been dissolved in my varnish, because the pigment that I use is a solid pigment. It's like a powder, and I have to dissolve it in the varnish and put it on. But then sometimes you still get tiny particles, which will make the instrument not look nice. Okay, and another difficulty I had when varnishing this is I realized that I believe it's because it's so much more humid in Hong Kong than in Chicago that my varnish isn't drying that quickly. And also in Hong Kong, because back in school we were using UVC lights. Actually, I don't really know the difference between like UVA, B, and C, but apparently UVC is like the strongest, and we were using that in school. And our varnish, pretty much most of the time it would completely dry within a day. But here in Hong Kong, even though we've got like 6, 7 lights, UV lights in the light box, it still takes a bit, probably around 4 or 5 days for each layer to dry. And I want it to dry before I move on to the next layer, because in the long run, if you don't let it dry and if you have like wet layers underneath, the varnish could move. It could float. When you put it into a case, if it's really hot, it could kind of melt again if it's not dry enough. So I do want every layer to be dry before I put on the next layer. And okay, so that's pretty much what's been happening, because it takes a few days for each layer to dry and so on and so forth. That's why I haven't been able to do a actual varnishing video for a while. Okay, so after this layer is dry now, it wasn't dry like 2 days ago. So this time it took like maybe 4 days to finish drying. I actually don't even know which is better, because in Chicago it was so dry that when we put our instruments in the light box, when we're tanning it or when we're varnishing it, sometimes it gets so dry that our seams actually open, and that's not good, and we have to fix those seams. Actually, I do have an instrument I have a viola that my seam, actually the seam of my joint came a little open and I have to fix that. But anyway, that's another story. Okay, so the steps in varnishing is pretty much, hold on, I've got a bit more to scrape here. It's pretty much the same as what you have seen the last time when I was doing the clear coat. Basically, it's the same thing, but this time my varnish has pigments in it and some oil to make it spread nicer. And so I have actually, because the accident that we had before was mostly because we didn't have enough oil in our varnish and too much turp. But I've mixed this new jar and it seemed to be working well. Okay, so again, start with, oh wait, I started at the wrong place. I'm supposed to do the fluting first, but anyway, still works. As long as I do the whole scroll first. I'll just finish this side and then I'll move on to the fluting and then the other side. Okay, so in the spiral, we don't want varnish to accumulate too much, especially now, because in Chicago, it wasn't that much of a problem, even when we had like really thick, even when we put on like thicker layers of varnish, because it was so dry. Everything would dry in 2 days at most. Most of the time it was just 1 day. But here in Hong Kong, basically, it can't dry if it's like too thick. So I'd rather put on many thin layers rather than like thick layers that won't dry. And I do think thinner layers come out so much prettier. I was just checking if the cameras were running. Okay. Oh, I hope I have enough memory on my phone. I forgot to delete the last video. Okay. So as you guys know, well, from what I was talking about last week, I've been like so into the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial the past 6 weeks. I couldn't really concentrate on anything else. And I'm so glad he won. Even though Amber says she's gonna appeal, I seriously highly doubt she can afford to. And seriously, like, why would she want to appeal? Like, she's not gonna win. Everybody knows that she's a liar. Like, the only ones who are still supportive of her, even those people, they don't really believe in her. They just think that it's bad for women in general, which I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, like, Amber Heard was pretty much harming the people who got abused, because people are gonna question women now. Like, are they being an Amber? And it's crazy, like, how in her statement that she's blaming this, like, she's blaming the court case, blaming the verdict, and saying that it harms Americans' freedom of speech, which is crazy. And also that's what her lawyer tried to put forward, like that's hurting the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech, which is crazy because you wouldn't think that you could just freely accuse people of things that they didn't do. Even with freedom of speech, you can't just make false statements about other people, right? Like, absolutely stupid. Anyway, I should go back to the fluting, which should have been the first part that I varnished. But it doesn't matter, actually. It doesn't matter too much anyway. Okay. It's kind of difficult to do this in English. Like, well, no. Varnishing and actually showing this in English is fine, but it's kind of difficult to chat about like other like local stuff in English. Like if I want to talk about like mirror or color, it would be like really weird if I did it in English. Well, and I'm also only doing this video in English because Lawrence wanted me to, so we can put this varnishing video onto our channel on YouTube. Yeah, so actually I really shouldn't be like gossiping about other stuff. Okay, and concentrate on my varnishing. So right now, like, cause I put my varnish is quite oily. It's got quite a bit of body, and the color looks richer with more oil. But of course, you can't put like too much oil, cause then it won't dry. Especially in Hong Kong. The accident that we had with our first layer, because both me and Lawrence were varnishing our instruments at the same time. So the accident or the incident, well, because we fixed it, that we had was that we put a lot of turp to thin the varnish down, and we believe that the turp was probably fighting with the oil, and it was like separating and pooling in places and not sticking to some areas, and well, just pretty much basically making a mess out of the varnish. So I mixed a new jar with less turp and more oil. It's working beautifully, but it might take a little longer to dry because the spike lavender oil is not as doesn't dry as fast as using turp. So I gotta remember to put some varnish on the edges of the peg box too. Usually with the scroll we'll have to put on like 1 or 2 more layers. I don't exactly understand why that would happen, but I think it's probably because of the grain directions. Okay, so I use my fingers to smooth out and remove any extra varnish on the scroll, on the edges. And then at this moment, because this is already the 4th layer, and I'm anticipating putting on like 6 layers in total. So for the last 2 to 3 layers, I would start putting in a bit of texture into the varnish. It just makes it look prettier and not so, because sometimes when you put on a lot of varnish, it looks, and when it's too shiny, it looks a bit, how do you say it, plasticky. Well, just not pretty. So we want to try to put in some texture into the varnish. And for most places, for the bigger areas, I just use the palm of my hand to tap it in. For other areas, I use the stiff bristled brush that's cut short. But I'm not quite sure if it's dry enough yet for the texture to stay, so I'll come back to it later. And I'll do the other side first. I'll like put on the varnish on the other side first. Because we kind of mix this varnish every time. It's a bit easier when we're in school because there'll be like big jars of leftover varnish lying around, and we don't really have to mix our own. Even when we do mix our own, it's usually just adding more oil, adding more turb, adding more pigment, but not making the varnish from scratch. Well, we make our varnish from scratch in school, but it's different because it was collective work, and our teacher would be supervising to make sure nothing goes wrong. And so this varnish that I made is actually the first time using varnish that I made from scratch. Like, I made everything. I cooked the varnish and I added turb, I cooked it, I cooked the oil. I am so glad that I live like in the countryside. I don't really have neighbors. My balcony is like not facing anybody. My balcony is like facing the hills, so I'm not harming people when I'm cooking the varnish, because the vapors from the varnish is not good for you. Like, I have to wear a mask when I go check on my varnish, and we have to cook it for like 300 hours, which is a long time. It takes a long time, and we have to check the temperature every hour to make sure it doesn't it's not too hot or not hot enough. So I can only do that. I could only cook it when I'm actually at home, but sometimes I have to go into the shop to work on other things like repairs, bowl repairs and all that. So I can't really be at home all the time, and yeah, exactly. Like, I have so many other engagements, so it takes me a while to actually finish cooking the 300 hours for the varnish. Okay, so just looking really good. Let me check check the other areas and I'll show you. Okay. This is looking good. Actually, I did manage to put in some texture, but then I highly doubt you can actually see it in the camera. This is the side I put on texture. And this is the side that just put on varnish, and I haven't done any texturing yet. Yeah, I'll try to put some texture into, wait, I should remove any extras from the edges. And also need to make sure this transitions smoothly into the neck where there's no varnish. Basically, there's no varnish on areas that we actually touch when playing it. There's another process for it, but that's like during setup. We'll talk about that later. So I'll just try to tap in some texture into the fluting too to make it look more natural. My teacher was very insistent on only using the palm of your hand instead of your fingers when putting in the texture. But I feel like it's pretty much the same anyway. Like, our teacher would make us use this little brush to put in the texture if our palm cannot fit, even if our fingers could fit. But this is still really useful. Okay, so putting texture here. This doesn't look dry enough for texturing yet, so I'll start with the ribs first. I'll do one rib and then I'll go back to putting in texture for the side of the scroll. Okay. So again, just put on a lot of the varnish. Actually, do you think I should put this closer so you can actually see the work being done? Okay, it's a bit difficult to move the camera right now because I only have one hand. I have to hold my instrument in the other. Anyway, so I'm just like smoothing out all this varnish, make sure there's not too much, and then with not so much varnish on my brush, I smooth some onto the edges. Actually, I might need a little more. Some areas look a bit dry. Like up and down, back and forth, make sure it gets everywhere on the rib, the other side of the edge. You know, I have this trouble. I'm partially colorblind, and we have to put in like red pigments for our instrument. And I actually can't really tell if it's like red enough or not until maybe after, well, more layers. because at this point right now, I still can't really see any red. I know I put in red pigments, and Lawrence told me that he liked the red on the instrument, but I just don't see it yet. Okay, so right now I'm just varnishing the under edge. Want to make sure I've got varnish on the under edge. And smooth out this varnish with my fingers on the edge. Under edge on the other side. Why is it this? Why is it so awkward? I feel like I'm not holding it right. Yeah, actually, you should. I hope I didn't get my hair onto the scroll. Okay, probably should do it this way. My edges aren't like very pretty because of the accident that happened earlier with my first layer, but well, it'll be fine after, because I'm gonna be shading this instrument a little, so it'll all even out at that point. Make sure the rib ends get a little varnish, and then I'll try to make sure there's not too much varnish again. Get rid of any extra. It around, make sure it's super even. Well, getting rid of the extra varnish is the most important to me at this point, because or else it's not gonna dry in this humidity. Okay, so remember that side of the scroll that I haven't put in texture yet? I'm gonna do it now. Okay, for the tiny bit in this scroll, I'm gonna poke with my little brush to get the texture in. I'm gonna be using this little brush a lot in the ribs area because I can't get to the seams with just my hand. Okay, looks good. So I'll move on to the next rib and then come back to this rib probably before I do the lower pouch to put in the texture. But as for right now, just like also like this pushing it around thing can helps me gauge how much time I'll need before it gets to dry enough dryness for me to put in the texture. Okay, so I flipped my grip for it, the C pouch. And you won't be able to see because the camera's so close. well, anyway, can't be bothered to move it around. I hope you can see at least part of it. And just like smoothing on to the lower part of the seatbelt rib and flipping it around to the upper part of the seatbelt rib. And then again, the edges as I've edges. And then the under edges, again, just gonna pull it out from the seams out to the outside of the edge. And then smooth out the varnish on the edge. Make sure don't leave any lines or anything weird. Okay, so the other side of the under edge, I'll have to do it this way. Gonna have to, because there are some like bare spots on my ribs which the varnish didn't stick enough to, so it's a little lighter at places. Those places I'm gonna at a later stage I will fill in, retouch the colors, and then varnish over that. I'll do that maybe on my next layer, and I can show everyone how I'm doing it. Okay, that looks pretty good. So move back to the last rib to put in texture. Okay. Oh, and a good indication of whether it's dry enough to put in texture is when you tap onto wherever you're trying to put texture in. When you tap on there, you see that you are leaving a bit of like texture marks, but you don't get that much varnish on your hand. If you're getting a lot of varnish on your hand, then it's not dry enough to put texture in. just like seeing this bit that I don't like much, and I'm just putting a bit more varnish on there. And as I've said before, we want the texture to go all the way to the seams. So along the seams here, where my hand can't reach, I'm gonna be poking with this little brush. Sometimes I do the whole C-bout rib with this little brush. I feel like it's, for the whole of the C-bout, it's kind of difficult to like press your hand inside here because it's kind of narrow. So sometimes I just use this little brush all over the C-bout rib. Well, I actually do that on the other ribs too. Like on places where I feel like it could use a little more texture, I just use this brush. Very helpful little tool. Okay, I should move the camera a little away for the lower bout. Yep. I'll move the camera back here later when I can show you the smaller parts. Okay, lower bout. I'm gonna do in 3 sections like last time. So I'm gonna do 1/3 of it first. Became too much. Oh well, you can just spread it elsewhere. Okay. Yeah, after this whole of the lower rib, I'm gonna go back to the C-bout to put in texture on it. I'm getting a lot of the pigment particles today. I'll see if I can show it to the camera later. Working on the under edge again. Under edge, and then the edge itself. Edge on the other side. I feel like it's not dry enough in Hong Kong for my varnish to dry quick enough, and sometimes I feel like the gravity is pulling the varnish towards the lower bout more. I don't know. Because the lower bout seems to be the last place to completely dry. At least in Hong Kong. In Chicago, I never had that problem. So 1/3 done. Flip over, do this point, I lean my instrument like on the edge of the table a bit. I don't put too much here because it's would get messy and get into the butthole. I don't really want that because I'm gonna be making the hole bigger and putting in the end pin after varnishing when I'm setting it up, so I don't want to get a whole lot of varnish into that hole, and I don't want the varnish to go everywhere. So the edges, then the under edges. If you can hear it, there's like people like doing like construction things across from my window, and today's actually Sunday. I don't understand why those people are working on Sundays and making such loud noises on a Sunday. It's quite annoying. I mean, like, obviously I'm working too, but then I'm not disturbing anybody working on a Sunday. The construction work is so damn loud. They're like banging things around, drilling things. You probably can't hear it. I actually waited for them to become quieter than earlier to start this video, or else it was so loud earlier I doubt I would be able to hear myself talk. And it's really stuffy today. That's why I have my windows open in the living room. I actually turned on the air conditioning in this room and then close the door, which is quite bad, but it's a bit difficult to close the door because I have a chair here, and yeah, well, this room is like really small, so I'm gonna do the last third of my rib. The pigment particles today, so I'll have to scrape it a lot before the next layer of varnish. But that's also fine because I still probably have at least 2 more layers before I'm done with actually varnishing. Well, I also have my shading. I'm gonna do some shading on the instrument, so that's fine for now. Okay, so the edges, under edges again. For this show, I pretty much hardly ever put on makeup. So I always have to beautify my videos to make sure you don't see my dark circles and such. But it takes a long time. I don't know if I'm still going to do that or not. And the lighting in this room, it casts really harsh shadows on my face. It's a little annoying when I'm making videos. Done with this rib. Okay, smooth out all this varnish. Okay, I'm gonna move the camera closer to me again so you can see the process. I feel like I could put a little more texture on my upper rib. And then for my seatbelt, okay, again, it's very difficult to reach. I'm just gonna use the little brush for the whole seatbelt. My camera was like nicer on my phone so I can actually show you guys the difference between having texture and not having texture. Well, basically not having texture would be a whole area looking super smooth, super reflective, and that does not look nice. It looks really cheap if you don't have any texture whatsoever. So I do think having texture is very important, at least to make it look expensive or at least not cheap. Okay. There's a little area that I would like to touch up, but I will touch it up in a later stage too, so it's not super important. It's just me being very particular about this. Okay. So where am I now? Okay. Should remove the extra bits from the rib ends. Okay, the next seatbelt, I feel like, let me try to adjust the height, the tilt, the angle of the camera so you can actually see better what I'm doing. Okay, I feel like this should be better. Yep. So this is the side that I've done. I'm just checking to see if there are anything that I missed. Okay. So, onto the other seatbelt. Yep, I think it looks better on camera right now. But if I flip it, oops, I hope I didn't. Okay, and then I flip it to the other side, I mean the upper part of the seatbelt. Edges. Other side. Okay. Under edges. Other side, which is more difficult. It's always easier on one side than the other side. I wish I could use both my arms and hands just as well, like being, but well, no, not. If I try to write with my left hand, it's like super ugly. So I'm not that agile. Make sure I don't get too much varnish here. Oops. It as even as possible. And let me look at this varnish. I feel like I could finish the upper bout before I go back to the lower bout to put in the texture. So I'll just wait a bit. So that's the seatbelt done. I'll do a touch up later. I should stop messing with it at this moment. About I find it actually really satisfying to see the varnish move around and just leave a little tint on it instead of like being really dark. Kind of like it like really transparent. and slowly build up the color. Sorry for forgetting to talk. Sometimes like go into a trance, like looking just looking at the varnish and painting. I'm doing the under edge on this side. Just picking the varnish out from the seams and up the under edge. Smoothing the edge with my finger. This varnish is like bad for your skin, bad for your lungs and all that. I quite like touching the varnish and like smoothing it with my fingers. It's just with all chemicals, like it can't be good for your skin or your body. Like even regular paint, it's not good to breathe in too much of that. Make sure it's not too dry at some places. Okay, so as I said, I'll go back to my lower bout and put in some texture. It's actually not that dry because you can see some color on my hand. Over bottom. Step back in. The other side. even when it's like not dry enough for the texture, I usually go back after I finish the whole instrument, because obviously this is Hong Kong, it doesn't dry as fast as when I was in the States, so I actually have extra working time for the varnishing. So I'll just come back to the seatbelt and the upper bow, and I'll come back to the seatbelt and the upper bow after I finish one side of the plate. Like I'll finish the top plate and then I'll do these two. And at the end of the process, I'm gonna check over the whole thing and just add in more texture as needed, or even I don't really need to do it at this stage because I still have like at least 2 more layers of varnish, but yeah, that's the idea. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the top plate first. It doesn't really matter if I do the top plate or the back plate. Here my wood acted a little weird with the chemical, but this area is fine. It's going to be covered by the fingerboard, and after I put in shading, it's not going to be so noticeable. Okay, so for the top plate, I'm gonna try to put the varnish in thirds, and for the first part I'll try to get the varnish to the edges and the corners first, and then I'm gonna go along the grains, which is straight, up and down, vertical grains. Start on this side so I have more varnish on this side, so I'll just pick up the extra varnish from this side and maybe move it to the middle. And then move on to the middle part of the plate, and try not to put too much varnish because it's gonna get into the F holes. Even though it doesn't matter too much, I can just use a little stick to get the extra varnish out, but it's just not nice having to do that. It's just annoying. Like, it doesn't affect anything in the end, but it's just annoying having to pick out the extra varnish from the hole. So I just try not to put too much in this area. And then I end up with too little varnish. So I just get a little more. I've got the middle part and the lower pouch, the lower part of the instrument. Oops, you can't see it. first thing is still trying to get everything all the way to the edges, because that's where you usually forget to get varnish to. Then once I have the whole plate covered, I do the up and down thing for the whole plate. Like right now, I can tell that my varnish is not thick enough to be called finish yet. So sometimes we see instruments that are varnished quite dark, but we can also see that the varnish isn't thick enough, because like with my plate right now, even though you can't really tell from the video, we can still see the grains being very prominent. Like the grains are still kind of visibly bumpy. I don't know if that's a good explanation. Like, yeah. So obviously you always see the grains, but they shouldn't look bumpy. Time to get rid of the extras. Like from the edges, use your fingers to smooth out the varnish again, or get rid of the extra varnish, or at least spread it out evenly. And for the F-holes, if there are any varnish that got onto the F-holes, we just pick it out with this little stick here, pointy stick. No, even if you forget this step, it's still fine, because before we paint the F-holes black, we're gonna scrape, or we're gonna use a knife to scrape it out a bit. Because what we use to paint the inside of the F-holes, it's a water-based color, and it won't stick onto the varnish. Okay, let me move back to my ribs. Shit, I forgot which side. Okay, this side looks like it's got texture, so it must be the other side. Even though I could still pat it a little more to make it look nicer. Okay, seep out. doing things outside again. Can they not on a Sunday? I'm actually usually at the shop on Sundays, but I don't have to go in today, and I have to try to finish varnishing these instruments ASAP because we've got like people who are interested in trying out our new instruments. I like to be a maker more than a restorer. So I've got to spend more time making things instead of like repairing and restoring things. I'm not getting enough time doing like making my own instruments these days. Sometimes I just go back to a spot that I've previously done. If I don't like the look of it, just go back and put more. Such a long piece of lint, gee. Go back to this rib and put in texture on the seams. I should make a bigger of this, so a bigger one, so it'll be easier to cover a larger area. Okay, so obviously my top is not dry enough for texturing it, so I'm gonna paint the back first. Similarly to the front, I'm gonna try to spread it. I'm gonna do it in thirds and try to spread it all to the edges first before actually doing the center part. And for the back, I go along the flames instead of the grains. So the flames are the horizontal lines here. Well, sometimes it's not so horizontal, but I shouldn't say going along the flames. I should say going side to side. Because I just happen to have a back maple part back with straighter horizontal flames instead of sometimes it's more slanted, so we get a V shape or an A shape of flames. But even with those, you just go side to side, like you don't actually go along the flames. Okay. Actually like varnishing the back the most. That's why I left it for last. I like to leave the more enjoyable things to last. Well, I like varnishing in general when I don't encounter problems. Then I love varnishing. I could varnish all day. So that's 2/3. You can see the difference. Color, not so much color. By side, and it's quite easy to see if I've got enough varnish on, because if you remember, I had those marks from the scrapers when I was scraping off the particles and lint and dust and whatsoever. So once you put a layer of varnish on, those marks, those lines disappear. You know when you've put on a layer. Okay. Again, we go back to the top and go side to side. And make sure it's nice and even. And not too thick. They're not like making a lot of dust with all that construction. Just did my laundry, so my wet clothes hanging outside on the balcony. I wanted to get dirty. It's so loud. I think like demolishing a building or something. So, as before, we smooth out all this extra on the edges. Before going back to texturing the top, I'm just gonna varnish one last little bit, which is the neck heel. So for the neck heel, just use a tiny bit of varnish because I don't want it to go everywhere. And I paint. To accumulate in my seams. with the neck heel same as the bottom of the scroll, because our neck is not gonna be varnished, so I just tap the edges and make a smooth transition from varnish to absolutely no varnish. So it's a smooth transition up to the neck. These days, well, sometimes some instruments that I've seen recently, they've got a super hard line here, which is absolutely disgusting. We want it to transition nicely. We don't want a hard line. Hard lines are ugly. Okay. Back to the top. Texturing the plates is so much easier. Just tap all over with the palm of your hand. With varnishing, it's quite funny. Like, you want your varnish to be smooth, but you don't want it to be like too smooth. So there's like a fine balance. With the texture in, it's okay. If I move it around under the light like this, you can tell that there's some texture in here. As opposed to this side, I haven't put texture in yet. Like, the only texture you see is the texture from the wood. But when the layers of varnish get thick enough, you won't see the texture of the wood, so it's gonna be just shiny, and we don't want that. It's ugly. Let me try to. I guess right now this step is not absolutely necessary yet, because I do have texture. I have the texture of the wood. It's not super smooth, and so it still looks okay. But with more layers on, this texturing becomes much more important. The neck heel here, putting some texture. Okay. So, this layer of varnish, this step is done. And I'm gonna put this back into the light box, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Hello，劈啪樂壇嘅時間，咁又繼續創作呢個中藥歌啦。中藥歌同方劑咧，我都係好想快撚啲作完佢嘅。咁咧，我好想加快呢個作曲嘅步伐嘅，奈何咧，連續幾個禮拜咧都加快唔到啊！因為嗱，即係淨係作咗中藥就作唔到方歌，作咗方歌咧就作唔到中藥，咁啊令我相當之困擾嘅呢件事。咁咧，我今日咧就嘗試，唔係即係今集節目咧，我嘗試一下可唔可以咧又作方歌又作藥歌咁樣樣。咁咧，我哋作咗藥歌先啦。其實藥歌對我嚟講係難啲嘅，因為每一首都唔有點講咧，即係每一隻 category 入邊，即係譬如話上個禮拜清熱瀉火咁樣，唔係清熱燥濕，清熱燥濕得5味藥，得5味藥咧，咁我嗰啲攞翻嚟作嘅歌咧，即係要嚟抄嗰啲歌咧，咁通常咧就係 AABA 嘅4段體嘅歌曲上嚟嘅。咁4段體點樣作5味藥咧？咁係有啲困難嘅對我嚟講，即係取捨嗰方面啊。因為每一個 cat 嘅藥唔係一定係4味噶嘛，唔係一定係5味噶嘛，唔係一定係6味，即係話唔定有幾多味噶嘛。咁好困擾，好似今次咁，今次咧就作呢個清熱解毒啊，清熱解毒啊，即係金銀花連橋啊、土茯苓啊、白頭翁啊、青黛啊、大青葉啊嗰啲咁樣咧，咁啊有9樣嘅，有9樣到底點樣寫咧，我都真係唔撚知。咁咧我開始錄片之前咧，我都諗咗一輪嘅，咁咧我咧就決定咧。用呢個 Blue Bossa，哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒，係啦，咦？冇 share 到出嚟喎，撳埋先。嗱呢首 Blue Bossa。啦哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒滴哒哒哒哒滴哒滴哒哒哒哒。哒哒哒哒哒，唔知有冇唱錯添，仆街啦！咁咧就應該歪晒㗎啦，不過就唔緊要啦，話俾大家聽係用呢個嚟做啦咁樣。咁咧好啦，咁啊我就即係雖然買咗呢本書啦，但係我都有啲對唔住咁講啦，逐味藥喺呢本書揾翻出嚟有啲困難，咁我就決定上網揼算啦，唉，好。咁當然有老師嘅筆記啦，哎呀，我要打老師嘅筆記，打老師，唉，算啦，唔緊要啊，老師應該睇唔到嘅。我出咗名之後，老師睇到佢亦都唔會介意嘅，我諗。係啦，金銀花好清熱解毒藥啦，咁樣本類藥物咧就清熱之中長於解毒，而適用於各種嘅熱毒、火毒，如痈瘡、療瘡、疔瘡啊，定係丹毒，哇！真係唔知咩嚟。溫毒發斑、熱毒下痢、蟲咬蛇蟲咬傷、水火燙傷。咁第一味咧就係金銀花啦，金銀花咧就係啦，金銀花肺心胃，金銀花，金銀花，療痈無對，未成則散，已成則潰。好，金銀花咧，肺心胃，味甘性寒。好，加多少少字俾佢啦，但可以減啊。金銀花甘寒或者味甘性寒，胃經肺可以調一調啲詞序，睇下等間順唔順口。哦，連橋啊， 連橋，哎呀唔係呢個連啊，屌你！又係啊，到咗未作曲就講粗口嘅時間啦。咁啊，多謝大家陪伴我就睇呢個出嚟作曲啊。咁啊，要講粗口嘅時候，真係正所謂發乎情就指唔到乎禮啊。咁咧就係要講噶啦，冇辦法。連橋。連橋苦寒，好睇下佢有冇其他藥性先。連橋苦寒，能消痈毒，氣聚血液，濕熱堪濁。連橋味苦性寒，歸肺心膽經。啱啱好7個字啊！錯啊！5句。肺心膽經係啦，連橋大青葉，大青葉。心肺胃，喺上面嗰個都係心肺胃，肺心胃有先後係有影響嘅，即係嗰啲次序嘅先後係有影響。心肺胃同肺心胃係有影響，是益而火，係青葉啊！咁樣嘅，好。要聞過佢啲味先會記得，其實個藥材好執下先得嘅。其實板藍根，咦冇喎，我呢本嘢有喎，佢喺新增嗰啲嗰度，我記得係，定我記錯？常用中藥。如果冇喎，我咪打錯咗。板藍根喎，竟然冇，我咪打錯咗字啊！ 板藍根，可能有第二個名板藍根。揾唔揾到先？毛根、藍根、山藍、板藍根，冇理由冇㗎喎。大青根、藍根、但係冇喎，冇藍色嘅藍喎。啊，得意喎！咦，但係我揀呢本書個目錄嗰時好似有喎。屌啦，聲落睇一次先。算喎，小心啲睇先。屌啦聲。板藍根。真係冇喎。真係冇。其實有啦，屌！咪有板藍根咯。點解冇嘅？網上面嗰個我奇撚柒鳩怪啊！屌！玩鳩我，咪先板藍根咯。板藍根寒，清熱解毒啊，涼血利咽。 大頭溫度。好，心為經，心為經，苦寒，板藍根啊！清代冇理由冇啦啩。好，清代。清代鹹寒。能平肝木，經簡甘利，兼除熱毒。好，睇老師嘅筆記先。清代鹹寒，肺唔係肝肺胃。就4樣啦。蒲公英、愛情蒲公英，哇，好撚老啊！隻碟都係已經等啲歌老晒先至出，跟住係啦，即等啲歌老晒先至出，跟住其實又已經出咗好多年。但係嗰時讀大學講 paper 嗰陣時，成日聽啊，成晚播住愛情蒲公英嗰啲歌，屌！清代啊，蒲公英，苦甘寒，肝胃，苦甘寒，苦甘寒，肝經胃經。睇下先有冇錯啊？肝經胃經冇錯啊！唉，最驚錯完作撚咗又大撚柒喎。射肝其實係咪咁寫嘅？定係簡體字嚟？我都唔知。唔係喎，真係咁。射肝。哎呀！俗語痛經，喉鼻口臭，庸毒堪硼。苦寒肺經。 白頭翁，苦寒大長經，白頭翁寒歸大長經。應溺蒼山，哎呀，我諗唔到啊！苦寒哇！已經過咁耐啦，已經食屎啊！真係。哦，土茯苓啊，土茯苓成日都出現啊，所以唔可以唔作啊！甘淡平甘為茯苓味淡，滲濕利囂百花壇現，赤通水道。黑茯苓有啲咩注意先啊？甘淡平甘為好叫做作完，唔係叫做 gather 晒啲應該要作嘅詞啫，屌！跟住咧好啊，其實咧，即係我依家作嗰首歌啊，Blue Bossa 嚟講咧，我唔知 Jazz 入邊有幾多首呢啲咁簡單嘅歌，其實應該多嘅，但係又唔係好多咯，即係咁樣噶個譜，再俾大家睇一次啦，係只係咁撚樣嘅咋，佢又唔係波，佢又唔係 blues 嚟嘅喎，佢係得16個巴嘅啫喎，好鬼抵屌喎，屌真係〜 似咁樣啦。金銀花未敢盛寒，金銀花未敢盛寒。哇！屌！金銀花未敢盛寒，歸經費心懷。哇！一行就唱鳩合撚晒㗎咯喎，屌！喂，唔好啊！金銀花未敢盛寒，歸經費心懷。歸經費心懷。咁啊大撚鑊喎！咁樣改一改，搞掂。金銀花未敢盛寒，歸費為三經。係啦，唯有咁啦。咁呢個唱兩次啦。金銀花未敢盛寒，歸費為心經，費為心經，歸費為心經，歸費為心經，歸費為心經。金銀花咩 call 嚟嘅？嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟嘟。金銀花未敢盛寒，歸費為心經。金銀花。費為心經，費為心經，費為心經，心經。金銀費為有冇咁多字啊？金銀花未敢盛寒，歸費為心經。金銀花未敢盛寒，歸經費為心經。費為心經，費為心經。金銀花 係啦。金銀花，金星寒，星寒。金銀花，未金星寒。金銀花，未金星，金銀花，未金星寒。係啦。歸廢為心經，心經。金銀花，未金星寒。歸廢為寒歸，寒歸，寒歸，廢為。啊，唔係喎，廢心為經。屌，再撚作多先。金銀花，未金星寒。金銀花，未金星寒。歸廢心為經，廢心為經。廢心為經，廢心為經，廢心為經。金銀花，未金星寒，未金星寒。歸廢心為經，廢心為經，廢心為經。金銀花，未金星寒。歸廢心為經。金銀花，未金星寒。歸廢為心經。如果變返做咁呢？金銀花，未金星寒。歸經廢心為。金銀花，未金星寒。歸經金銀花，未金星寒。歸經廢心為。銀花，未金星寒。未金星寒。歸經廢心為。歸經廢心為。金銀花，未金星寒。歸經廢心為。金銀花，未金星寒。歸經廢心為。類似咁嘅，慢少少大哥唱唔到啊，幫下我啊，100算鳩柒撚數啦，哇！ 金銀花美金星河，歸經費為心經。唔係，嚟多次先。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費為心。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河，歸經費心為。金銀花美金星河。哇屌！點撚樣得3個字喎？撩翁無對，都睇佢解釋係咩先。唉，其實應該上 lecture 嘅時候作埋咁嘅濕鳩歌㗎嘛。你冇 lecture 作喎，我冇心機上嗰陣時。唉，戇撚柒鳩，好怨恨啊對自己，屌！金銀花，睇先，撩翁無對係咩意思？金銀花，金銀花喺邊？冇嘅屌，但係金銀花應該同連橋擺埋一齊喎。咩叫撩翁無對？呢個字係咪讀翁啊？屌，唔知喎，係讀翁啊嘛。 係咯，庸咯，庸追咩意思啊？哦，庸無對，已成則散，未成則潰。庸無對，庸無對，已成則散，未成則散，已成則潰。療庸無對，療庸無對，療庸無對，已成則散，已成則潰。哇，好複雜啊！我都唔知 work 唔 work 其實。療庸無對，已成。療庸無對，未成則散，已成則潰。療庸無對，已成則散，已成則潰。療庸無對，已成則散，未成則潰。療庸無 則山，未成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。對，未成則山，已成則古。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸廢心懷。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸廢為心。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。金銀花未甘勝寒，再嚟講啊！金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。屌你老味！金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢為心。屌你！金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。再嚟過。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。金銀花未甘勝寒，歸經廢心懷。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。唔係咩？好難唱啱啲音。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。好難攞音喎呢度。遼雍無對，未成則山，已成則古。對，未成則山，已成則古。金銀花未甘勝 歸經費心為，金銀花美金星漢，歸經費心為，遼雍無對，未成則散，已成則潰。遼雍無對，未成則散，已成則潰。遙雍無對，未成則散，已成則潰。遼雍無對，未成則散，已成則潰。好。其實搞掂一段咧，其他都會易啲嘅。連翹尾虎聲漢，歸經費心膽，連翹尾虎聲漢，連翹尾虎聲漢，連翹尾虎聲漢，連翹尾虎聲漢，歸經費心膽，金銀連翹尾虎聲漢，連翹尾虎聲，連翹尾虎聲漢，歸經費心膽。費心膽，連翹尾虎聲漢，歸經費心膽，能消痈毒，氣聚血型，濕熱堪濁，能消痈毒，等先，能消痈毒，能消痈毒，能消痈毒，能消痈毒，氣聚血型，濕熱堪濁，能消痈毒，能消痈毒，氣聚血型。睇先，能消痈毒，氣聚血型，形濕熱堪濁。睇先，能消痈毒，氣聚血型，濕熱堪濁。能消痈毒，氣聚血型，濕熱堪濁。能消痈毒，氣聚血型，濕熱堪濁。 笑容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做，能消氣絕，熱堪做。能笑容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能笑氣最熱堪做。能笑容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消血吸熱堪做，能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做，能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做，能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做，能消容毒氣最濕熱堪做，消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，氣最血型，氣最血型，氣最血型。消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消毒堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。能消容毒氣最血型，濕熱堪做。 笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，能笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，能笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，能笑瘡毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，能笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，能笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，連橋尾苦聲未寒，歸經費心膽。連橋尾苦聲寒，歸經費心膽。能笑住血凝濕熱堪做，能笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，連橋尾苦聲寒，歸經費心膽。連橋尾苦聲寒，歸經費心膽。能笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，笑容毒氣醉血凝濕熱堪做，連橋尾苦聲寒，歸經費心膽。橋尾苦聲寒，歸經費心膽。能笑容毒嗱，作住兩隻寫住先。唔係打開樂譜啊，新增啊，新建啊，係好煩啊！插電先，冇電啊！清熱解毒。你想咩 key 啊 ？C minor， 唉，啱啊，32小節啦，32啊，唔好，16嘅倍數啊，16乘 我屌16乘9啊！仆你個街！16乘9等於幾多？16乘9啊，咁啊 Kelta 啫。嘿，低能的 Kelta 唔係低能嘅，不是 Kelta 而是我。144啊！哇，又係啲咁撚樣嘅譜啦！屌你老母！一行4個小節，格式，哇掂啊！喺呢個小節度加 pick up beat， 喺邊度加 pick up 㗎？添㗎？先 pick up 有一加，我記得。係咯。唉，求緊期啦。花。我屌你冇撚咗嗰個 dot 嘅，屌你啊！費心費心為。好，又係 copy and paste 嘅時間啦。 貴噠噠噠噠噠，貴廢貴勁廢，咦係咪錯咗啊？花美金星漢，貴勁廢。漢貴勁廢 ，OK。好好聽啊！屌。OK。金星漢，貴勁廢心，銀花美金星漢，貴勁廢心為。死啦！了用無對。係啊屌！ 無對未成則散，已成。哇點啊屌！金銀花未敢勝寒，歸放為三季。金銀花未敢勝寒，歸經費心為。遼雍無對未成則散，已成則潰。遼雍無對未成則散，已成則潰，已成則潰。黐鳩線黐落去，金銀耶！耶！呢個小節線咧，可唔可以俾啲？可唔可以咁樣啊？係啊，係啊，斷啊屌！好，我又抄先屌。連橋未敢勝寒，連橋未敢勝寒，唔係喎，連橋未苦。連橋未苦聲未寒，連橋未苦聲未寒，連橋未苦聲未寒，連橋未苦聲未寒， 歸經。連橋尾虎聲未看，歸境費心膽。連橋尾虎聲未看，歸境費心膽。能笑連橋。好，唔可以照抄個 riff 度，所以都係嘥鳩氣。連橋尾虎聲未看，尾虎聲未看。尾虎聲未看，未看。屌你啊！屌你啊！遼雍無對，未成則山。唔係喎，唔係。但能笑容多。能笑容多，氣聚血凝。能笑容多，氣聚血凝。死啦，唔記得添。能笑容多，氣聚。去喎。能笑容多，氣聚血凝。能笑容多，氣聚。哎呀，仆街啦！失意堪作。能笑容多，能笑容多， 氣聚血型12堪作，哇！好彩記得啫。能消融毒氣聚，能消融毒氣聚血。能消融毒氣聚血型。嘿。搞掂，好，唱一次俾大家聽啊！好，我搞個小節線先，呢一款，寫埋啲歌詞先，唔好咁心急。連橋，哎呀，漏咗添，不過唔緊要，第一同第二行係一樣嘅字，所以 copy and paste。連橋尾苦聲未看，歸境費三擔。連橋尾金聲未看，歸境費三擔。能消擁朵。能消融兩個字嘅毒氣聚。好。 氣醉血凝濕熱堪足。好玩，搞掂。好，清熱解毒咧有9味藥嘅，即係我唔止9味藥㗎，當然梗係唔止啦。但係老師教過嘅有9味，我決定要作晒佢。但係我作咗今晚返去連橋先，然之後我擺低，我再作第二個 cat，因為每個 cat 都識啲藥係重要嘅，咁我唔擺太多時間喺清熱解毒呢一個 cat 裏邊，我作咗頭嗰2首先，咁其他就會二作噶啦。二作嘅時候咧，咁翻手再作，下個禮拜再作第二個 cat。好，都唱一次俾大家聽啦，大家聽我成晚喺度講粗口，有啲營養嘅嘢啦，都冇營養嘅。嚟過。金銀花未金星看，歸敬費心為。金銀花未金星看，歸敬費心為。療用無對，未成則散，已成則苦。療用無對，未成則散，已成則苦。連橋未苦，聲未寒，歸敬費心膽。連橋未苦，聲寒，歸敬費心膽。消用毒氣醉，血凝濕熱堪足。錯咗。能消用毒氣醉，血凝濕熱堪足。類似係咁啦，但係後邊啲歌詞錯咗。連橋未苦，聲未寒，係啦。消用毒氣醉，氣醉血凝濕熱堪足。哦，呢兩個。再遲啲，濕熱堪足。唱多次連橋俾大家聽啊！連橋未苦，聲未寒，歸敬費心膽。連橋未苦，聲未寒，歸敬費心膽。能消用毒氣醉，血凝濕熱堪足。能消用毒氣醉，血凝濕熱堪足。連橋未苦，聲未寒，歸敬費心膽。連橋未苦，聲未寒，歸敬費心膽。能消用 最血型12貪做，能笑擁毒氣最血型12貪做。咁樣先啱啊！屌！貪做爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸爸，血型12貪做12貪做12貪做12貪做。好，就咁先，今集節目咧，我會作埋首方歌嘅，但係錄嘅時間咧，我就分開錄啦。我要食飯，好肚餓，食個飯再翻嚟啊！繼續作，今個禮拜要作多一首方歌，咁咧就咧，作咩方歌咧？俾翻大家睇先。作咩方歌咧？就係作呢個叫做五人院啊，係啊，五人院啊，係呢個啊。五人拍人行人圖，從人陳皮郁李瑤，我唔知咩叫瑤唔知係乜嘢，其實燒為密丸米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。哇！特區政府同特區政府啲文采有得揮啊！哎呀，咁咧就係呢個咧五人丸啊，咁咧呢個潤下嘅一條方嚟嘅，咁咧中醫入邊咧凡係啲種子啊，種子都有呢個潤下嘅作用嘅，咁有五種嘅種子啊，係啊。5種嘅種子啊，咁睇下有啲乜嘢先係啊，有呢個松仁啦、桃仁啦、柏子仁啦、松子仁啊、郁李仁啊、陳皮啊，係啦咁樣，咁咧就咧郁李瑤啊，哇咁咧就作咩歌咧？咁啊作呢個叫做《實單 call 300》。類似係咁嘅啊，因為我驚我唔睇住唔識唱啊，類似係咁。噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠滴噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠。噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠，咦？呢個唔齊個噃。啦吧啦比度，嘟噠噠吧吧，噠噠噠吧吧吧。咦？去咗邊啊？我就係唔識唱個 B 段啫嘛，個 A 段梗係識唱啦。吧噠 滴滴滴叭叭叭叭叭叭叭。啊唔係喎，呢個係 D key 喎，我想揾翻個 C key。咦，尋日有㗎，尋日有嘅噃。啊先，呢個唔通唔係呢個？啊，應該係啦，應該係呢個。噠噠噠噠噠噠噠滴噠滴滴滴滴噠噠噠滴噠噠噠噠滴噠，類似係咁樣啦。我哼一次啦，鳩嚟啊，鳩哼一次，鳩哼一次啊！哎呀，未作曲就講粗口嘅時間啊嘛，唉，大家都冇人聽啦，哎呀，真係。噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠滴噠，噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠，哇！噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠，噠哩噠哩噠，噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠噠，啦啦噠噠。噠哩噠哩噠，滴滴滴滴滴滴哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哩哒，哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒哒，係啦，類似咁樣。哎呀，好開心啊！聽到呢個，其實佢係 Take the A Train 嚟嘅。Take the A Train 我作過。Take the A Train， 哎死啦，唔記得係咩歌嚟嘅。Take the A Train 嚟嘅其實。Take the A Train，You must take the A Train。係啦。五人拍人行人圖，人拍人，個人字咧，陽平聲啦，哎呀，屌，沉晒底啊！人拍人行人圖，人拍人行人圖，五人拍人行人圖，一二三四，五人拍人行人圖。改少少先。人圖，哎呀，變翻100啊！長咁快。人拍人行人圖，人拍人行人圖。 人你要人拍人行人途，趁皮夾滴喐你要，重人陳皮喐你要，人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要。其實唔可以咁密嘅喎，嗰度唔撚係俾你咁樣，但係試下咯。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒黃蜜月為湯。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要。再慢啲，我個腦諗唔到嘢。拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜丸米湯茶，用重人陳皮喐你要，燒蜜丸你亂鳩晒大佬。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜丸。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜米湯下用長曲變更高，人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜丸米湯下用長曲變更高。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜丸米湯下潤長曲變更高。人拍人行人途，重人陳皮喐你要，燒為蜜丸米湯下潤腸通變下 聽後邊嗰段。
人黑人行人途，從人陳皮郁理要燒為蜜丸，米湯下潤腸通便效更高。
咁樣啦，不如
人黑人行人途，從人陳皮郁理要燒為蜜丸，米湯下潤腸通便效更高。人黑人行人途，從人陳皮郁理要燒為蜜丸，米湯下潤腸通便效更高。人黑人行人途，從人陳皮郁理要燒為蜜丸，米湯下潤腸通便效更高。
寫出嚟先隨得啱啲，寫出嚟啦。收到咪到到。
人拍人行人途，從人陳皮郁理要。
好，32個bar form，係啊，咁就格式4小節，係啦。收到。3、4，收到咪到到。啦，巴巴巴巴。嘛巴巴巴巴巴巴巴巴巴巴。
燒為蜜丸，燒為蜜丸，米湯下潤腸通便。巴巴巴巴。 人長通便效更高。人長通便效更高。人長效更高。效更高。人行人途，從人陳皮郁理要。其實作完㗎啦，係啊，其實作你A 段作完咯，A 段作完。copy and paste 咗先，跟住，其實唔應該咁早 copy and paste， 不過有鳩柒佢啦，屌！5人院係攞嚟做乜嘢㗎？5人院個 topic 係乜嘢嚟嘅？方劑歌。快啲！唔係喎，唔係內科喎，屌！內科冇上過咁滯，真係食屎！呢個？唔係啊！19年唔係啊，要20年。其實方劑應該要學得好好先係，但係一開始已經跣腳，超唔熟啲藥，跟住方劑嗰時就唔撚知佢做乜。其實方劑應該要好熟，應該嗰個老師教得好，咁所以係應該要好熟先係。津敷便秘，潤腸通便，好啦。係攞嚟做咩嘅咧？就擺喺 B 段度講。津敷便秘，西醫得校方5人丸，津敷便秘。好。好啦，戇鳩啊！唔係我戇鳩嘅啊，唔係廖若芳戇鳩，亦都唔係首歌戇鳩。
好難戇鳩啊！夫將便秘，讓長通便。好難戇鳩啊！哎呀，好中意啊！夫將便秘，讓長通便。夫將便秘，讓長通便。好得意啊！好撚戇鳩啊！我依家都覺得好撚歡喜啊！好啦，會點咧？咁樣嘅，唔好有呢個咁樣嘅。人長通便，哇屌！咁其實作完㗎啦，已經我打翻啲詞落去啦，我唱一次俾大家聽。黑人行人圖，都係睇翻歌詞，唔好扮嘢啦。五人黑人行人圖，陳皮行人，屌你老味！過嚟！五人黑人行人圖，從人陳皮喐你要燒毀。咩？五人黑人行人圖，從人陳皮喐你要燒毀蜜丸米湯下潤腸通便效更高。五人黑人行人圖，從人陳皮喐你搖， 不如打啲字先唱啦，屌你，唱到閪咁撚樣，唉，屌你老味！縮手，縮手，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀，哎呀！通電效。哇！屌！春風便被人長通變。他人行人途，行人陳皮郁你要，燒為蜜月米糠下，人長通變效更高。五人拍人
皮，喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。苦針便秘，潤腸通便，噠噠噠噠噠噠噠，苦針便秘，潤腸通便。人拍人恨人圖，衝親戚。幾多次啊？人拍人恨人圖，重人陳皮喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。人拍人恨人圖，重人陳皮喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效。哎呀，聲非常搞到暈低。人拍人恨人圖，重人陳皮喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。人拍人恨人圖，重人陳皮喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。苦針便秘，潤腸通便，噠噠噠噠噠噠，苦針便秘，潤腸通便。好唔夠喎，冇錯。屌你啊！燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。聽下先。喂。恨人圖，重人陳皮喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯下，潤腸通便效更高。人拍人恨人圖，重人陳皮喐你要燒為蜜丸，米湯。好，喺呢度嘅。
好，搞掂啊！真係唱咯，唱到就收啦。
人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。夫盡便秘，潤腸通便。夫盡，哇！呢度唔識唱啊！等。夫盡便秘，夫盡，夫盡便秘，潤腸通便。夫盡人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。人拍人行人圖，其實連呢段。夫盡夫盡便秘，夫盡便秘，夫盡便秘，夫盡便秘。練下先。夫盡便秘，潤腸通便。夫盡便秘，潤腸通便。人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。夫盡便秘，潤腸通便。夫盡便秘，潤腸通便。人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下潤腸通便效更高。人拍人行人圖，重人陳皮鬱你要，燒為蜜丸米湯，下 人途，從人陳皮鬱你要燒為蜜月米湯下潤腸通便效更高，苦盡便秘潤腸通便，我呢個音。苦盡便秘潤腸通便，五人黑人行人途，從人陳皮鬱你要燒為蜜月米湯下潤腸通便效更高。
放歌一首，用咗45分鐘作啫，咁就還好啦，還好啦。咁就去邊啊？咁就翻嚟先。咁就降低個目標啦。咁就可以達成到目標啊。咁咧我就冇作晒成首藥歌啦。清熱解毒冇作晒，做咗2味藥啫。但係咧，我要做埋放歌咯。咁2條腿走路啦，希望可以做得好啲啦。咁就係咁先。咁今日劈啪樂壇咧，就唔知有冇練琴嘅時間咧？我都要睇一睇個鐘做人，冇乜時間，但係都想做好啲嘅，係啦。咁樣就練習嘅時間希望多翻啲啦。咁就好，下個禮拜去再同大家見面。練琴咧就睇我做法啦。好，咁啊多謝各位欣賞啊！我就都係各位陪我作曲啊，咁樣多謝晒，拜拜。
睇完節目記得 like、comment 同埋 share 我哋嘅 channel，收睇最強頻道，訂閱熱血時報。